state of Owerri, in eastern Nigeria, Agbama strode through the halls of the Owerri state government building, her high heels clicking on the marble floors. She was a striking figure, tall, with caramel skin and an hourglass shape accentuated by her tailored dress suit. But behind her beauty lurked a dark secret. As a high-ranking official, Agbama had access, power, and connections. She used those to run an underground empire trafficking drugs and exploiting young women into prostitution. Her ruthlessness and greed knew no bounds. On the streets, Agbama's henchmen prowled, luring vulnerable girls with promises of money and a better life. But once ensnared, the nightmare began. The girls were beaten, drugged, and trafficked to wealthy and powerful men across the region. Anyone who dared to defy Agbama disappeared. One new recruit was Adana, a bright 19-year-old from a rural village. Adana's dreams of university were shattered when her father grew ill and couldn't afford her fees. In desperation, she answered a newspaper ad for a hostess job, unwittingly falling into Agbama's trap. At one of Agbama's raid brothels, Adana was imprisoned, robbed of her innocence and dignity night after night. When she resisted, the beatings intensified until she became obedient and hollow. Her spirit was crushed. Meanwhile, a new political force was rising in Owerri. Mr. Obi, a former anti-corruption lawyer, was elected governor on a platform of sweeping reform and justice for the state's most vulnerable. But he was vastly underestimating the depth of corruption and cruelty he was up against. As the new administration began investigating troubling reports of a prostitution and drug syndicate, all trails led to the highly respected and powerful Agbama. But she had covered her tracks masterfully over the years, insulating herself with threats, bribes, and complex blackmail schemes. The turning point came when one of Agbama's own brothels was raided after a daring tip from a brave survivor. Among the victims was Adana, now a broken young woman. The horrific scene, along with her tragic story, ignited an unstoppable fire under Mr. Obi and his team. Raising the stakes further, Agbama issued a brazen threat against Mr. Obi's own family, nearly forcing his resignation. But the governor's moral resolve was unbreakable. Coming from a life of hardship and injustice himself, he vowed that no family in Owerri would endure such horrors under his watch. With secrecy and meticulous preparation, Mr. Obi's team tightened the vice around Agbama's organization. A once unshakable network of corrupt officials, police, and political operatives began turning, facing imminent exposure. One by one, the brutal syndicate founders began squealing, purchasing minor sanctions to avoid harsh sentences. In a climactic night raid, Agbama herself was apprehended, attempting to flee the state with over $30 million in ill-gotten assets. In dramatic footage that gripped the nation, the regal woman once seen as untouchable was led away in chains, her high heels and designer suit contrasting with her disheveled appearance. In the aftermath, Governor Obi made his move to heal deep wounds. Adana and hundreds of other victims were rescued and transported to one of Nigeria's most prestigious trauma and mental health facilities, fully funded by the Owerri state government. Counselors, social workers, psychologists, and medical experts pooled resources to help the women and girls transcend the unimaginable horrors they had endured. Months of intensive therapy began the long process of reclaiming identities, self-worth, and futures. Many initial reunions with families were heartbreaking as loved ones wept over fragile souls they struggled to recognize. But gradually, day by day, smiles emerged through the tragedy. For Adana, it was an unimaginable journey from her village's tiny farming roads to the horrifying bondage of the flesh trade and back again. But her indomitable spirit, strengthened by her faith in the support system around her, allowed light to slowly pierce the darkness. 1 year to the day after her rescue, Adana addressed the crowd at the inaugural Owerri Women's Empowerment Summit, her voice steadier than anyone could have imagined. She spoke of her stolen dreams, her descent into horror, and the compassion that encircled her when she thought all hope was lost. "My story is not unique," she told the rapt audience. "Except that through life's unrelenting challenges and society's cruelest ills, I was one of the fortunate ones. I had a government, a leader, and people who were unstoppable in their vow to protect our dignity." Adana's speech, broadcast nationally, was a galvanizing force. Everyday citizens rallied around Governor Obi's comprehensive initiative to expand women's rights, protection, and economic empowerment across the state. Nonprofits, businesses, and religious organizations partnered with the administration to open new shelters, job training programs, and educational opportunities for all women, regardless of background. The governor himself handpicked Adana as one of the first recipients of the new Owerri Women's Education Fund, reinstating her dream of pursuing university on a full scholarship. Her courageous life story reminded everyone that hope was always possible, even after the darkest nights. At last, after feeling like a voiceless object for so long, Adana had reclaimed her authentic identity as a powerful voice for change. A voice that would continue to resonate through the halls of the government that had once brought her such horror, but now empowered her. As for Agbama, the woman who had once terrorized the state now faced judgment from those she had oppressed. In a study of karmic justice, she was sentenced by the same courts she had illegally enriched herself through for decades. With her vast assets seized, co-conspirators testifying against her, and an airtight prosecution by Governor Obi's team, Agbama received multiple life sentences for everything from human trafficking to racketeering. In the end, her physical beauty and sophistication were relics of a hollow, evil core that rotted from within. The former dignitary's arrest and imprisonment were celebrated across Owerri as symbols of an oppressive old guard being permanently dismantled. For the first time in generations, the state's future grew brighter, more just, and more prosperous by the day. An army of survivors like Adana were inspiring nation builders, reminding everyone of the resilience and power of the human spirit. As the sun set over Owerri's capital, Adana felt a contented peace watching a young girl joyfully skipping along, holding her mother's hand. A sight that had once been her own childhood, then taken away, but now restored to the next generation. This was the happy ending that she and all her sister survivors had yearned for. A new era was dawning in Owerri, one of empowerment, opportunity, and freedom from violence and exploitation. The nightmare was finally over.